I'll start. Do you know that we have an ode? Sword has an ode. Do you know that?
Yes.
Yeah, well, some ode. We thank farmers for the food they produce and the care of the country for current and future generations. I think it's pretty good. Well, we don't have any other. I'm not going to add the little bit. Okay. Enjoy your evening meal. I should call for apologies. I've got one, Marg Molyneux. Who, sorry? Judy Daly. Can you do that? Thank you.
It's a person in the wrong room. I'll go and retrieve them. Sky Bellamy.
Oh. Water in New South Wales are having a meeting. You should bring them along. We should put somebody into that meeting. Anyone feel like being a mole? No, we should.
They're next door.
Yeah.
Okay, come on.
It's really fun. Okay. Now, for those of you who are from other government agencies, I just want to remind you that this is going to be an extremely well-run meeting. We don't want any shenanigans. And if you misbehave, we have plainclothes policemen waiting outside to escort you to a paddy wagon. I'm going to take half an hour to explain to you how we should run this meeting. I'm not, actually. You will understand that Solicitor Holt was to attend, and that was going to be very powerful for us. Unfortunately, he is not able to attend, but we decided we should continue with the meeting because it's important to get feedback on these representations. I think we'll talk a bit about Holt later, will we, or will we not?
I don't think there's much more to say.
No.
He said he's conflicted.
Conflicted, and therefore couldn't come. Very sad, but anyway, we'll look into that a little more later ourselves. So basically the aim here is to help prepare submissions to the landholder negotiation scheme. I've always found that extremely strange. You're going to teach us how to negotiate. It's very odd. And there's a lot of parallel stuff going on with that, which is far more, in my opinion, important. So we will cover that as we go through this this day. We are not giving any legal or financial advice here. Sort of concerned landholders, just like all of you, no different. And we're just trying to do the best we can to do two things. Basically, we want to delay this process, and we want to make sure there are no easements on our land, because it's the beginning of the end, I think. You can't have an easement because you lose sovereignty. When we will open it to the meeting soon, but try not to hog time, give everyone an opportunity to speak, and we'll try and get as much out of it as we can. So, Debbie, over to you. Here, you're going to have this.
Thanks for coming, everyone. And sorry that we had the notice out for Peter. Some of you may or may not have received the updated one that said he wasn't coming, so I'm sorry. A few people said it went into junk mail, but we really appreciate you coming. It's important you're here because on the 24th of this month, 24/11/24, we have submissions that are due, and we get submissions in. We have a group as well. But it's really important. Numbers do count. I spoke to rice growers yesterday, and they see no problem with it. Although told by the government that we could not do a group submission, I don't think they've got any right to be telling us what we can or can't do. So let's get the group one in, but please, if you all can, we will have a template hopefully at the end of today, which will get out on the email, and that will give you an opportunity to add your own parts that are relevant to your farms or your concerns. So hopefully we can pull that off today. We don't want to take up too much of your time. We will be as quick as we can. The submissions relate to the LNS, and specifically I think it's important that we address the LNS so we can precisely address and say why we have a problem with it. However, we also are going to take the opportunity to put in all of our concerns with respect to all issues of the entire program. And as Blackie mentioned, it's not just about the LNS. This is about a whole lot of other issues that they've thrown at us recently: the unregulated water, the riparian rights, the cultural water, the compensation, the heads of compensation, the review of the Just Terms Act. So there's so much stuff. It's quite a big area. We're going to hopefully put it all in. So I think today what we'd just like to do is start off at a fairly basic level, and everybody who has areas that they would like to see covered in the submission, we would love you all to now throw those ideas up. We'll find a scribe in a minute. Have we got a scribe? Anyone good at taking notes? On a whiteboard?
There's never a volunteer if you ask for a scribe. Never.
Okay.
Good girl.
Well done. Thanks, Trish. I have the worst handwriting. Thank you.
That doesn't matter. We can decipher.
Okay, so firstly, has anyone got any questions before we kick off? Yeah.
On the line when it's on the front line when it says have your say, it only directs you to a PDF form to fill out. So it probably gives us a chance to fill in our own submission.
I can answer that.
Hang on, let's have the question again, Tom, because
Then it will record.
So,
She's going to ask the question again on a mic.
So, can you hear me?
yeah.
So online it's only directing us to a PDF form to have our say. It's not giving us a chance to have an open submission.
Tom?
yeah, I actually did check this morning, and it read lower. I printed it off here. If you read lower, it says,
I think it's on.
yeah, you can fill in the online form, or you can download the PDF, or separate written submissions can also be emailed to admin.rrcp, which is on the website, or they can be mailed, and there's a snail mail.
It's a bit late for that.
You might not know if I say that.
So what was that website? What was that email address?
Admin.
Long time since I've done this. Yeah.
.rrcp.
Yep.
At dpie. .nsw. .gov. Yeah, .au.
So that's where your submission should go. And I think everyone, I mean, there's not enough of us here, but every single person who lives on this river or is affected by these issues should at least say no easements. If nothing else, just stop it. But I know we're going to discuss more. So if we go into workshop submissions, Tom's given us here. Content, issues, and idea generation. So it's open to the floor. We've got a mic. Bernard, are you happy to be the mic boy? You're very good.
I could do that.
Thank you.
So we're wanting to share our issues that we want in the submission now, or what we think should be in the
I thought
Yep.
that was what you wanted, yes.
I think
and
that
maybe
was
I
right.
wasn't clear enough. Thank you, Tom. So anything that we've got a submission virtually done, but if we go through that, then everyone will sit still and say, well, that's a good idea. So please give us your ideas. What troubles you?
I think, Diana, you had some good points about the loss of
Hang on, there's
production
one
costs.
now from the previous questioner. Thanks, Bernard. Maybe we could throw that
I'll
in.
stand up so my voice can do some. Hi, so my issue is, why have they such a high level of releases? Can't they do it lower at a more gradual pace so that they're not drowning or flooding, which they're trying to fool us with? So, over a long period of time, and then why are they doing it in the peak harvesting and shearing time?
Well, I guess we don't know when they're going to do it. That's one of the questions. But I can make a point. We know exactly when?
Oh, the period, August to.
Oh, okay, sorry, during our harvest time. Okay, I apologize.
What's the height?
Well,
So that's an issue, no height decided.
Three different heights, and they haven't decided the height.
Yeah, but the minimum is 5.6, which is my friend here started at 2.8. So why?
I understand.
That's actually
Township that decided,
Hardship
you know,
is
that
like,
three different levels, and they will decide one level. And what gets me is,
do you want to use the mic, sir?
No.
No,
what gets
sorry.
me is, how can, everyone's in a certain sense different, obviously, but what gets me is, how can we decide on something when we don't know the height? When there's three different heights, if they come out and say, this will be the height, then we know what we're up against and what we're fighting, and everyone's circumstance is different. So obviously, some people at the lower level are not going to get worried at all, so.
No, what are
without the.
Yes, you got another
The
5.
buffer is 6.5.
Yeah.
It's maybe 2.5.
By rate, right? 30.
Yeah, that's it.
at 40,000 and 6.1, I understand.
Yeah.
6.1 at Wagga.
Yeah.
But I think the other problem for individuals is, it's all very well us knowing it's 6.1 at Wagga. We don't actually know what it's going to be at Mandala. So we have to calibrate ourselves, which we've done. And I guess all of you have done it. 6.1, you know what it does to your property. So I guess that's good enough. Actually, in answer to the first question, and Diana, you can clear me up on this. Originally, when this was first mooted, they were going to send water down on top of large floods so as to get to the high wetlands. Now that's gone by the board. I mean, it is really high. That's gone.
Has it gone?
Well, who knows? I guess what they're telling us, it's gone. 45 being the highest.
Yeah. Piggyback.
Yes.
Is there any chance of getting it stopped altogether, like we got it?
That's our ultimate aim, I guess.
I think,
The big problem is if we stop it, then they've got to do something with the water. They'll store it in the dam, then it will come in and make.
Exactly.
They'll store it and wait until it's into a situation where they can't hold it and then it's like that. So in a way, we've got to work with them to try and release it, but we need to know the level, and everyone that I've talked to just hates the idea of easements.
No, that's what we've got to stop. Easements. We can't stop flows. The water has to come, and hopefully it'll come sensibly, but they can't guarantee that either, because if we have a local storm, then it's going to be more than the 6.1. So there's no real control there.
And the easements, it'd be really nice to get some clarification whether we've got any hope of stopping it or no hope at all. I know power lines and roads, whether people like it or not. So the thing that I see, if we can't stop it, then we've got to get them easements written up to suit us. But
no, we intend fighting on to the death on this one.
On easements.
On easements, we must all,
you've got to have a plan B.
no, we will have a, just with the easements, we just say no to the easements. It is a violation of property rights. We will take it as far as we can, the easements. There is no reason. We do have a plan B. Victoria, on the Victorian side of the Murray, they have absolutely said there will not be easements. We're talking with rice growers. They are talking to Victoria. to go to the minister and to discuss how stupid this is, how ridiculous it is. So we have got that precedent that we can at least follow up on. No easements in Victoria, none on our side. So I think there's a plan.
We have an alternative.
We have an alternative which we'll discuss at the end of today, that because we don't want to look like a pack of rednecks. We're not. We're informed people who've gone to a lot of trouble to do a lot of homework on this, and we have an alternative that we will present to the government if they're interested in listening. And if they're not interested, well, that's another reason why you should be very darn suspicious. Trish.
Sorry, I understand the no easements, I get that, and I've had this conversation with you before. There are some properties, like for example our property, that if we still have those higher flows of water, we're buggered, stuffed, basically. So the easements at the moment are the only way we will possibly get paid out for the country that we will no longer be able to use or access. So I have a concern about that side of it, because
The only trouble is if they're going to use this act, you get nothing.
well, we don't know that, do we?
Well,
Because
we do,
Just Terms
because
Act is not, it's under review.
Well, unless they drastically change it, I look at it very closely, I can tell you, you get nothing.
Yeah, I think it's next to nothing.
Let's just.
Trying to fool us again, because they've said repeatedly in the meeting, we don't want the land, we want interest in the land. But legally, interest in the land is actual ownership. So you've got to be careful. They're using a lot of deceptive language.
Tim, do you want to just speak
Well, I'll just
to
tell you
that?
about the Just Terms Act very simply. What they do is they value your land, and there can be some arguments about that. You can go off to the Land Environment Court.
Good luck.
Anyway, you can get to some reasonable value. There's been a lot of land sold around the place, especially in the country, so it should be that hard to value it. Then what they do is they say, what percentage of your land, your farm, if you like, is affected? Now, they'll argue vaguely about that, and so say they say it's 10%. Then they go to the 10% and they say, to what effect is that 10% being reduced by the flooding? They might say, it's 50%. So you get 50% of 10% of the value of your property. So sweet fuck all.
You can.
Yeah, it does all the time.
I learned it from him.
Well, Tim, I was a valuer for 40 odd years, as you know, the government, and specialised in doing just terms acquisitions and things like that. And I never had adopt that attitude at all. There are ways to go about it, dealing with comparable property sales, things like that. You've really got to find a place that's blighted the same way in terms of the easement. Now, the easement itself will have a purpose clause that dictates, and that's a very important one, it dictates what the easement's going to do. For example, there may be an easement over the property at the moment, but for another purpose or for an earlier purpose. But this one can specialise and state. It should state what the acquisition is for at the present time. In other words, it's for cater for excess water, or is it environmental flow? I would suggest to you that it's rather the time there we've had this announcement of 400 gigalitres to send to South Australia. I think it's about that. It's a great travesty and dishonesty that's going on at the moment.
It is. They won't admit to that. But I think we need to answer this between you and Tim. Tim's calculation, which you've mentioned, is still sweet FA. It's not enough money to compensate you for anything, I believe. Tim, your point.
It could also be multiplied by frequency and duration. So 3 times a decade for 2 to 5 days. How much would that lower?
I don't know. I just see a lot of
Or up to
arguments
21
about how much
days.
of your land's affected. They gave me a diagram at one stage when they were talking about a higher flood than these levels, and I reckon they were 50% wrong. I mean, and I gave them my map at home, but I've never been back.
Yeah, Trish, mapping
I mean,
areas.
this thing has been going on, what, for 15 years now? It's almost got to the point where we're in the grave before it's sorted out.
Oh, that's true.
Comment?
Yeah.
Address what Trish brought up. We're supplying 10 the circumstances are different. You doing yours, the idea of 10 plus. That coming, and what we can do is try and delay that time and push so that minimises the impact and gives us time to say no to easements. The easements will be there forever once they're on, and we'll never ever be able to get the government to rescind easements that they have over and control over our land. However, in the long run, we might be able to stop the flows, or the governments will stuff it up and the flows will get stopped by themselves. And if we have no easements, we can come back to the world that we currently know. So that in their submission with the template, we're going to leave room for everyone. We're going to supply.
They're asking for submissions on the negotiation scheme itself. So unless we can tie it back to that document, they'll just write whatever you're saying off as our scope. So the document does mention the Just Terms Act. So we can say that that act on its own is not good enough for compensation. And I do agree. I've had a quick look at the Just Terms Act, and it's only about valuations. So for most of us, the biggest costs that we're going to incur is ongoing costs, things like fencing, spraying, weeding,
They're the things we
resowing,
want to
all that
cover.
stuff. And on a very rough look at it, I don't think that's covered at all. So they indicated there will be compensation for that, but I
Correct.
don't see it in that act.
When you look at it, it's talking about your market value. And if Tim will know more about this than I think it's section 55B talks about special values. So when I saw that, I thought, oh, that's good. We all have a lot of special values. These are where all of these costs come in. You will note, and I have a real problem with this, that they are specifically excluding us under special value with respect to longevity on your property and with respect to your emotional tie to your land. 2 areas that a lot of other people get compensation solely on those 2 areas. So when we are excluded from that, I can assure you they're going to be excluding us from most of the other heads because they're not specifically mentioned. Tim, what are the other heads other than market value and special purpose?
That's the problem. I mean, for instance, my place gets flooded out. I lose all my loosened under all my got a resale, especially if that happens between August and November. You basically lost all your hay production. Unresale back to April and May, so it's absolutely bloody disaster when you have a big flood if they do it frequently.
So with the review of the Just Terms Act, I dare say none of us have addressed in a submission anywhere. Are we able to argue with them now that there needs to be other heads under that legislation?
That's what we've got to try and do on review, because loss of income is probably more important to me, for instance, than loss of value.
What about loss of infrastructure as well? Because my friends have been losing pumps as a result of all these.
Yeah, all those things.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't lose infrastructure. My place just fills up like a lake.
We could go water skiing, Timmy.
Can I just respond about what their request for submission is and the feedback that we've had? As you said, they're trying to set a frame that we can only submit about the LNS structure, not even the content. So there's two people I've got feedback from. One is Dr. Joe McGirt. Are you Maria?
Yes.
Nice to meet you. So Maria's from Dr. Joe's office and is representing him today. So thank you for coming. So Joe McGirt said he recommended we put everything in, every single issue around all of the programs, LNS, Reconnecting River Programs, Cultural Water, it doesn't matter, put it all in because the government is duty bound to report it, even if it's there. The other bit of, even if it's outside of what they claim is the scope, the other bit of information was Peter Holt. His advice was that the government also cannot reject any submissions on the basis that they're saying it's out of scope. So again, it has to be reported. So this is one of the things we wanted to do today is really get clear on that and so that we should be putting every issue in because this is really our only chance to get it on record.
I think too, Deb, there's been a situation where people can ask that the cost of getting legal representation, things like that, ask the acquiring authority if they are prepared to pay for that.
Well, they've talked about there might be a figure of $5,000. We've also approached them now and said, well, we need this now. We need legal, financial, mental health, whatever we need it now. Oh, we haven't got that far yet. So this will all be over before anyone recommends that you get anything. So
well,
I think
we that long, and I think that mental health will become a real issue.
Absolutely.
The way it's been going.
Well, it already
Absolutely.
is. It already is for people. But they have said, no, we haven't got around to that yet. We've specifically asked on mental health. And the only time you're going to get any money for your legal fees will be right when they're about to put your hand on to sign it, the easement, and they'll say, now this is what you've agreed to, take it off to your lawyer, and they will have a quick look at it. And you'll get somebody who hasn't got a clue who says, yeah, that's great, $5,000. It's too late then.
But it's also far too little. It's not going to compensate for the sort of losses that we might be experiencing.
Well, no, your legal fees alone.
The legal fees.
You asked about the other headers of compensation. There was disturbance, injurious affection,
Can you add these ones, Trish, too, please?
special value.
What's special value?
Special value, they say, is if, for example, you're running an Airbnb or like eco huts or something, and so your business is affected in another way. And they have said, if you remember the notes that LLS gave us, it said, this is probably not relevant at all to this claim. So we were already given an indication that it probably wasn't relevant. And then when you drill down, it says, and you're definitely excluded for emotional attachment and longevity on your farm. So they're specifically going right to the heart of farming by specifically excluding us.
It's amazing because when the LNS come to our place, they didn't know anything about headers of compensation.
No, the LLS.
Yeah.
No, they didn't.
They didn't know about anything. It's been unfortunate.
Can I just say, has it been lost on everyone that the department that's doing all this is called climate change? And we know that climate change is a big hoax. I mean, it's a big scam.
Perhaps we shouldn't discuss that.
As a main issue, because Albo shook hands with Bill Gates, who's just been made president of the Committee 300 that's running this climate change scam. And it's all been generated by the 1956 Act that was given to the CSIRO to conduct weather notification actions across Australia with the HAR and the spraying of our skies and the poisoning of our water and food and everything else. This is the main issue because they're doing all this to run you out of business. So Bill Gates can manufacture his meat in factories and market them instead. He already owns most of the US's land He already owns most of the Northern Territory and 2 towns in Victoria.
I just think we need to stay
Yeah.
more
No, no.
specifically on track.
No, I think, I think that's a very relevant, and I think it's very important, and I think probably everyone here is aware of that. What we are doing is one small bite at a time, and if we can stop easements, that's the first part of protecting our property rights, which gives us the strength and the power to then take on the next stage. And I'm totally supportive of your comments. And I think climate change,
Climate change, the question mark there.
yes, and it also can be added to your personal submission.
No.
On compensation, what gets me is they've tried to push this on top of us. They've given no one any indication whatsoever what compensation, what sort of figure. If someone comes to you and wants to buy your property, or another farmer wants to put an easement on your property, one of the first things you want to know, if not the first thing, is what's it going to be worth to them? Well, we still have no, it's the same as the level heights. We have no idea what it's going to be worth to us.
Well, I'll give you one comment that one of the people who was on our property said to us as we crossed a billabong, which will sever several hundred acres once water goes through it at 36,000. And I said, well, we're going to need a bridge here, and a bridge at 50 or 60 metres is going to cost you a couple of $100,000. And he said, oh, Deb, it's all about value for money. In other words, you've got to be joking. So I can assure you, if
You're not going to get much.
they can't afford to do the 2 crossings on our farm. I said to them, you can't afford to go between Gundagai and the Mundalo Bridge. You haven't got enough money to do that section. One of our neighbours has, I think it was 13 billabongs that he needs crossings because they're on separate titles. So he can't just have one to access the property in case that property is ever subdivided. So you'll get nothing.
Just on top of that, they've talked all along about mitigation measures on properties, which is what you're talking about now with the bridges. But they haven't come back to any property, as far as I know, to tell you what sort of mitigation measures they're actually going to do in your property to appease you or to give you some level of comfort going forward. And if they've done these on-farm visits, they should have come back to us and said, righto, Tom, you need a bridge and a culvert, we'll put them in for you. That'll give you access to the bulk of your country. Don't be too fearful about what's going to happen. We're going to look after you.
I don't think they can allow any bridges anyway, that's because
It's a constraint. It's a constraint.
Forget about culverts
But
and
what
bridges.
sort of mitigation measures are they going to do if they're not
Well, I
going to
think it's
do
a good
that?
point that you put it up, they haven't told us what mitigation. So they're trying to fudge us through on that.
They actually take the bridges away.
Yes.
They'll put bridges and culverts in, they'll flood someone else out. That's just changes the flow of the river so much, little things like that.
Some years ago, we tried to get a culvert in this billabong that Deb's talking about, and they wouldn't allow it. You couldn't raise anything above the level, the base level of the billabong. This last visit, we can have a bridge or a culvert, no problem.
The fishies have learnt
But
how to
look,
go
I
through
think
them.
we've got to go back to Tim's point. There is no money to do all this. There's no way they can do it. So I think compensation will be piecemeal and not really relevant to all of us, for sure.
They will tell you whatever you want to hear and give you nothing.
Yes, because they want the easement, so therefore they'll say you're going to get compensation. We don't want easements and we don't want compensation if that's what it means.
Going west of Wagga, they've also got a plan out at the moment for, I think it's closed for comment, but it's called the Draft Murrumbidgee Valley Floodplain Management Plan. And that says that if you're in the flood area, you cannot build bridges or roads or anything on that land. So whatever they're promising you under the
Compensation.
it's other plans. So there's conflicting legislation.
Is that
obviously-
under review now, that document?
Finished.
It is, but the comments are closed,
Right.
but it's still a draft plan.
But
And it goes from west of Wagga out.
What's the plan called?
It's called the draft Murrumbidgee Valley Floodplain Management Plan. And if you're in Zone A, which is where the flood goes, you cannot do anything. You can't even build a road, more than 10 centimetres high.
Yes, that was the original. So it's obvious that they're not talking to one another. It's really odd. Murray.
The reason for the three scenarios, 32, 36 and 40, was their studying cost. Now, the least costly one was 32. So as they raise the stakes, raise the level, the cost goes up. And let me assure you, the state government is worried about cost. They don't want to pay anything to anybody at any time.
I thought the loop was going in February, that's what Joe said. He said they got bucket loads of money.
Well, they got it from the Commonwealth. They got $274 million in their last round of funding this year.
274 was going to.
They won't do the road.
Hang on.
No. Sorry?
No,
No.
Tanandra Bridge is 9 million. It's been approved. No, the total funding for that next stage, there is going to be another stage of funding. And Mundawi.
But if you find all the money's coming from Commonwealth, the while we go out and there, they'll throw it, the money. So you get it in a hurry, what do you want?
Just alongside that draft Murrumbidgee floodplain management plan, which you're bringing up, there's also what's that plan called, the wetland?
It's the unregulated stream.
Yeah. Yeah. So they've got this other one out as well, which is about unregulated streams and rivers, and they're classifying some areas on properties as wetlands.
Sorry, could you speak up?
Sorry.
Also, as part of that unregulated
Close to your mouth.
review, they're introducing, or they've put out an overlay for prescribed wetland areas, and they've done this on the Lachlan River. They've also done it here on Murrumbidgee, where they want to reclassify land as prescribed wetlands, which to these environmental flows. The implications are that if you've got existing floodwork approvals for pump sites or irrigation structures, your ability to get updates to that, if you have to change pump site or whatever, if they are in those areas or nearby, it's going to be much harder to get floodworks approved.
That's a 3 kilometre radius too.
3 K.
For Ramsar wetlands, but not for just the prescribed ones. I think that if you look back at the draft Murrumbidgee floodplain management plan that they've got west of Wagga, the other thing is that there are a lot of existing floodworks that are not approved from back in the day, subject to the outcome of that floodplain management plan. Some of those works may be required to be removed or changes made, which will change all the modelling for programs like this. So one would have thought that you need to finish one plan before you try and implement another when your modelling is reliant on.
Are they going to be listing the areas on your title that are wetland, or how are they going to identify that, and what are our rights?
There's a draft map that's been put out as part of the process, which they've just picked up an overlay from another government department, which has shading on various areas that they're now hoping to get classified as a prescribed wetland, which...
Because we went online and it wouldn't come up. I couldn't get the mapping up for our place.
It's only west of Wagga.
No, it's not. I've got a link.
Oh, you've got it.
It's WSP wetland. What's WSP stand for?
Watershed.
1,600 wetlands they've earmarked between the dams and hay.
Oh,
That's a lot of wetlands.
So have we done a submission on that one?
There is one wetland east of Wagga, which is in the area there for the where the spiral railway is up here. The catchment for the dam, the railway dam, that's there.
Bethungra Dam.
Yeah.
But for example, that overlay on some of, like I work for a corporate ag business, so we've got farms west of Wagga. On one of the farms, the overlay has an irrigation res marked as a wetland, which it's a man-made water storage. So it just shows the inaccuracies in what they're presenting, but
That's
there's some
classic.
issues that need to be resolved as part of the process.
Yeah, but I think the important point you make is if there are changes anywhere, it changes the modelling. So we can never be up to date unless they all get together, these people in government, different silos get together and decide on an overall plan, which they've tried to do and can't.
Well, just on the modelling, when I built the fish farm in Roberta, they made me build it out of the floodplain. And when the last flood came, they took aerial photos, and because it had water in it, they put them on around and put in a floodplain.
You can't win.
Just why some of you people are going to be a lot cluier than me about this, but I had a look at their website and I seen, and I'm not sure whether this is what you're talking about, I noticed that they've included 3 new lagoons. Is that what you're talking about there? So one of them is on my place, one may be on Miles' place, and one's going to be on Paul Fennell's place. Yeah. What I understand. So if they class that as a wetland, so what does that really mean to me? Like I have had no notification about this. I stumbled across this.
I think the main issue is whether there's works approvals or existing irrigation infrastructure in or nearby those areas. Probably down the track, they then want to try and increase flows to make those areas into more permanent wetlands. But on one of Works farms west at the law, yeah, they've got the irrigation res marked as a wetland, but they've also got other areas that they've marked as wetlands that they're arable cropping fields, which, yes, they go underwater and be flood event, but are they wetlands?
Is that Michael?
I think with these mics, you've got to hold them very close.
And you might not like doing that.
Made your point.
Yes.
Just another thing about that too is we're being bombarded by all these things all at once, and it is impossible to devote the time and the energy to get your head around what the programs are all about and how they're going to impact you. And I wonder whether that's a deliberate tactic by the
Yes, it is.
people to just inundate, not flood, inundate you with all this stuff that we have to
Too
try and
many
do.
programs coming in at once, somebody's at the same time.
That's
Yeah.
what I'm saying. And it's impossible to understand the information.
Can you put that down, Trish? That's good.
Bernard.
I had an alternative that I mentioned to them the other day, and it was dismissed. And they said, no, we haven't looked at that at all. And it was dredge the riverbeds, clear up all the weeds and rubbish, and create more capacity for the rivers so it doesn't flood anyone and there's no need for this. It was just totally dismissed, and they said they never even researched.
Yeah,
Well, there you go.
no, fish habitat and things like that would not allow you to do it. But on our place, which is 5 kilometres of Murrumbidgee, we've lost at least, I'd say 12 500-year-old gums because of the high water over a long period of time, which is mismanagement. So they're not going to get rid of them, and I don't think you can dredge the river. I've got another alternative 30 years ago, but they dismissed that.
So
A floating
the point that we
barrage.
need to put up is that there's natural constraints that aren't being removed.
Yes.
And then what's the impact of that on the overall flow regime that you're trying to do by relaxing physical constraints or manufactured constraints?
Yes, I think it's a good point, but they're not going to do anything about it.
No, but
probably.
we can raise
should
it.
raise it, yes,
because we've raised it before. We think it's an
many
issue.
times.
Graham,
Two more.
no, Graham was first.
Graham, go. Up to your lips.
Oh, I was going to flick it around. There's a second slide.
And photograph. Yeah.
Girl on her knees.
Also, what concerns me is, and this has happened to me twice,
Right.
I've been threatened with legal action for not paying the water bills. Now, my wife is a very stringent person with the bills, and the last time I said to her, let's stick to the bottom of it. Well, it took her 3 days, and and they charged us, wasn't much, but whatever the interest was, because we apparently hadn't paid on time. Now, after 3 days, they finally agreed that we were $1,000, over $1,000 in credit. Now, I've rang 2 of my neighbours up only yesterday, and they're going through this same thing. I think one of them has spoken to Joe McGurk about it. If they can't even get their bills right, how are they going to get this right?
And they can't take legal action for 5 years. It's on the Ombudsman's website. Unless you're over 5 years in non-payment for anything to do with council, if they can't take legal action.
Thank you.
That reassures you.
Just another point to make is that the water modelling is being done to the maximum of 40,000 megs, as far as I can ascertain. But it should be done for the buffer as well, to the 45,000 megs.
Agreed.
And it has not, as far as I know.
No, we've asked that in the most recent letter that hasn't been replied to, and that was 6 weeks ago now. They haven't replied.
And the second part of that is, if they start removing the constraints along the river prior to then the water modelling will be trashed, really, because that will change the way the water will flow and the quantity of water that will come down.
There's also an alternate on the science of that, and I haven't got a chance to go through it at the moment, but rice growers have some scientific evidence that constraints actually is a fair bit of hogwash, and it doesn't impact these flows to the extent that they're saying. So there is some science out there that I will track down, and we should think about it.
I think, and Troy Stone is quite concerned about this, that we've got to make them responsible if they get it wrong. If this does happen and they end up putting 6 metres down the river and it ends up 8 metres, they're responsible for it somehow.
And how are we going to, when flood, local streams are going out along creeks up, Tarcutta creeks up, and they say it wasn't us.
Yeah.
Was
If they have easements, they don't have to worry.
That's right.
That's why easement's critical.
But I was speaking with someone on the Murray River about that the other day, and they were saying that I think down there they're talking about a 50,000 meg flow, and they're saying that if they get it wrong by more than 10%, they are aiming to include that in any agreement that there will be compensation available. So whether that's a possibility, I don't know.
Could we argue, like what they're saying is they're flowing it up to 6 metres and anything above that is an act of God? Well, we should flip it on the other side, say the act of God is up to 4 and you're putting another 2, so yours is the top water, not the bottom water.
It's a nice way to argue.
Well, discretionary water is always on top.
Yes.
Have you thought
How am I
about
going to word that?
holding a meeting and run it, well, a group like this, running it and inviting them to it? Because the way I look at this, I came to the last meeting, it took 30 minutes for them to say welcome. And it's my time, it was 30 minutes for them to take. In the last half an hour of this meeting, I think we've got more out and aired more than what you ever get out of them, because they hold the microphone, when someone speaks, and take it off and give it to someone else. Make them sit down, we run the meeting and make them listen to us.
Well, we tried that with that last meeting, but it didn't turn out.
I think what we have to just take a bit of faith in, that a lot of people think we haven't got any power to stop any of these things. But the fact that we pushed back early and we have really been fighting hard for nearly 2 months, we got one extra meeting. So if we push really hard and there's a lot of us, we can stop the easements. So I think we take faith in the fact that we have had a result. They're not interested in talking to us. Honestly, couldn't care less. Murray.
But if you go public with it, that they won't talk to us, that we've called a meeting, they won't talk to us, it makes them look pretty bad.
But
Sure.
they will say, in accordance with the legislation, they have consulted with us, because they don't care that consultation means one notice in a paper. That's tick that box. So we're never going to win the argument. They will do a submission to government that says they've consulted, it's been a great success, 200 properties they visited, over 900 people were contacted. We all know it's rubbish, but honestly, they will have ticked that box of consultation.
If that's the case, what hope you got to stop the easements?
No, we can.
Well, we can, I think.
Murray?
What I did notice as I came in.
Take the microphone, Murray.
What I did notice as I came into the club, there were several vehicles in the parking lot with state water written on
They got a
them.
They're meeting next door.
We wanted you to be a mole, but no, we couldn't go.
Should be in there with state water.
I wonder whether one concern might be.
Timmy.
Tim.
Hang on, no, it's too late.
On properties that aren't even gaining effect.
They're saying they won't take those.
They've backpedaled on that
But
one.
that's stupid too.
Well, I don't know, I mean, what happens if someone has, for instance, a property that floods at 7 days? They're going to run along and grab that as well, because
That was the original plan, but they've actually backpedaled on that now, and they've come out and said, if you've got no flooding, you probably won't even need an easement.
They've said probably.
well, that'd be a major concern for a lot of people who you don't get flooded at 6.1 meters or 6.5 or even 7.
Yeah. Yeah.
And don't forget, the easements are going to then affect the riparian zone. There is the cultural water and for access. We don't have any understanding of what that ultimately means, that legislation. It then brings in, and don't forget, under the Riparian Act, when I finally got around to looking at it, that it includes gullies.
On
So
your
I
property.
think it can, therefore you've got a 40-metre buffer on any side of a gully on your property. We've worked out, we've got about our lounge room left that hasn't going to be impacted by some riparian right or access, an unregulated stream, an easement or a wetland. So I think we have to look carefully at some of these. Timmy, that's where you come in.
Not enough shade in Australia.
Yeah, we can handle that.
Well, you're not retired.
Diana, go.
Thanks, John. Those of you who don't know me, my name's Diana White, but I do masquerade as Diana Gibbs, who was a director of the Maritime Basin Authority when this plan was introduced. Now, as an economist, I always expect rational, analytical, logical solutions, and this is not what we've got here. This is politics. I'm afraid politics trumps policy any time. What happened was that the plan had the concept of the upwater, the extra 450 gigs up to 3,200, and the downwater, the 500 down to 2,200. And that was all to be adjusted what the authority called the Constraints Management Program and the SDL adjustment mechanism, where they invited the states to put in a bid for projects that would help the authority meet those targets. Now, New South Wales put in a bid for something called the Reconnecting Rivers Country Program with a budget attached to it. The government has obviously now decided that budget, well, they've probably spent the money anyway on something else, but there is not enough money to implement that adjustment mechanism in the way that they originally thought. That was with the infrastructure, what they call the mitigating infrastructure. So they're, and I'll be very crude here, they're asked protection mechanism because they are precluded and prevented from, they're prohibited from flooding private land. They say, well, we'll have an easement, so it doesn't matter if we flood the private land because we've got permission to do it. So because this is
let me just add, as an economist, I would have thought that they should have conducted more of a cost-benefit analysis on this, and I would have thought that a lot of the financial institutions would not be very happy for an additional easement to be added onto the mortgage that they hold. I mean, when we applied for a Farm Innovation Fund, our lending authority had to give permission for that extra loan to be added on the title, and an easement would be just the same. We asked the question at the last meeting, to which Michelle answered, oh, well, I've spoken to the Bankers Association and APRA, whatever, but they couldn't possibly give an answer because it's up to an individual situation between a borrower and a lender. Because it is so political now, I think our best weapon here is actually Joe McGurr. And thank you for attending. Joe has been very much on side with all this. He has the benefit of being an independent, so he doesn't have a party body telling him what he can and can't do. I think in terms of compensation and not, just look at the Transgrid announcement yesterday that it's been approved. Joe was working very hard. The devastation to the forest industry that's going to cause is unbelievable. And yet, as Deb said, they said they've consulted, and the EIS was actually written on a plan that they knew they were not going to do. So they then adjust to the plan they did want to do to say, oh, we've listened to everybody's complaints. So, and just on the climate change thing, I hope everybody watched Chris Allman's documentary yesterday on Fox about the cost of our, look, circulate that to everybody. This is another example of politics again, just ignoring the economist's good rational thought. So back where we are here, yes, the submission is officially to be on our views of the process that they have designed. Do we think 12 months is adequate? But yes, then say we are actually putting the submission they have asked for, but then go on and put in everything else as the speakers have suggested. In terms of easements, my own view is that there must be better ways of covering their backside. Just asking us to give permission for floods, for example. I mean, they're not suggesting floods that are above the current minor flood level, which are the country that will be flooded. It gets flooded anyway.
The difference is, though, they're going to flood you on a regular basis, not every year, but on a regular basis. And the flood level at Wagga is not relevant to individual properties, because for some people at Mandalo or at Common or wherever else, at 5, they're already under. So it's not just about what's at Wagga, it's because this is still our land and our right to operate the land the way, in the manner that we bought it for.
Yeah, the environmental watering program is determined by the Murray-Darling Basin Authority, and that won't be regular. It'll be depending on what they think the priorities are, what the climatic conditions are. All the New South Wales government is taking the money to implement some of these constraint management programs. So the state government's not going to be deciding when it's flooding. They're just trying to develop a system that will cater for various eventualities. But it'll be dependent on the MDBA actually deciding what their annual environmental watering program is going to be.
Well, they've done a pretty poor job at times in the last 15 years.
I left the board in 2016.
Sorry, I'm not having a crack at you first. Anyway.
Thanks, Diane. I think that mic wasn't on, actually. Sorry.
Bernard, you had one job.
We need to stop because what we're talking about now will come up later on in this little agenda. So we suggest you have a break for 15 minutes, have a cup of coffee, 5 minutes. You can't get a cup of coffee in 5 minutes. Okay, 5 minutes, and then we'll come back.
Get it ordered anyway.
What's that?
Let's see if you can get a cup of coffee ordered.
We could, I guess. I'll do that. How many want a cup of coffee?
Thank you.
We'll all wander up.
Okay.